Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for giving me the opportunity to speak to you this afternoon. So the title of my talk, when it comes up, is Beauty and the Beast. No, this is not a plug for the new Snow White movie that opened today. It's actually meant to indicate sort of how non-creative professionals can sometimes add value in creative industries, like the art world, which I'm going to show you an example of, by focusing on some of the less glamorous back-end processes, which we call the beast. So beauty is all the creative processes in the art world. It's the act of creating the art. It's the act of curating the art. It's the act of actually getting the art to collectors and other sort of people who would value that art and it'll live on for generations in museums. That to me is the core of the art world, and that to me is sort of what defines the art world. However, in order to make this all happen, there's a bunch of non-core stuff like shipping, billing, invoicing, all the other business processes in the back end that are horrible to deal with, but at the same time are absolutely essential to making the art world grow and prosper and to making this economy grow. That is what I refer to, and as many dealers in the room are nodding, refer to as the beast. So I was a biologist by training, and sort of till about 2 years ago, most of my background was in healthcare and entrepreneurship relating to healthcare. But in 2010, I happened to find myself in a situation where I'd sold a company, and sort of, being brought up by very culturally astute parents, I thought this is a good time for me to start trying to collect some art and actually contribute more to the cultural capital of the world. So I was introduced to sort of a gentleman who was working then as the marketing director of Philips Deputy, who was Alexander Julka, my co-founder, who wanted to do something entrepreneurial in the art world. He felt there was a lot of opportunities to add value. Now, before I committed to him, I said, look, let me go back and at least look at creative industries and see what entrepreneurs in the creative industries look like, because clearly I had no idea and I wanted to see if I could fit in. So if you Wikipedia creative entrepreneurship and you look at what examples exist of creative entrepreneurs, there's Madonna, the very symbol of sort of poise and sort of glamour that exists, and she's a big creative entrepreneur. There's Sir Richard Branson, who is the flamboyant owner of Virgin Airways, Virgin Mobile, Virgin Airways. There's my co-founder, Alexander Julka, who looks like that every day in the office, I promise you, and also sort of was one of the youngest auctioneers in New York and sort of very active on the art world social scene and extremely embedded in that space. And then there was me. I kid you not, that is actually a high school photograph of me at 17 years old, and I still feel like that inside. But sort of the idea there being that sort of I had no idea sort of how I could add value in this space, and sort of honestly sort of what I ended up thinking was that the only way I can potentially add value is by going to sort of things that I'm familiar with, which was all the business stuff and all the back-end stuff that I'd done my entire life. Now, we did a bunch of stuff on the front end as well. I don't want to underplay that, but this talk is not about that. We experimented with online curation. We do online sales. We work with art fairs, foundations, museums, galleries, bringing the art together in an online platform, which is really an effective way for many collectors to explore art from around the world. But that was not what sort of I felt I could sort of add value in. So I focused instead on all the other stuff, which is all the back-end stuff that no one else wanted to deal with, honestly. So if you look at most retail processes, right, we're all used to going to a store, any kind of store, and buying something. There's usually a seller of some sort, there's a buyer of some sort, and there's some kind of a black box between them that enables them to sort of interact with each other and buy something almost instantaneously. This is as true of buying groceries as Whole Foods as it is of buying sort of a luxury bag at Louis Vuitton. I mean, this exists across the entire universe. Now, when I came in, sort of, I said, okay, this is pretty straightforward, and I'm sure sort of, when Alex asked me to create an online transaction platform for this website, it must be extremely elementary to find something like this and plug this in. It'll take me a few weeks. It's not a big deal. In the art world, it's not actually that elementary. So the way I understood it, a transaction in the art world actually is a combination of an interaction between 4 to 6 different people, all of whom have to coordinate with each other and sort of work with each other to make a transaction happen. There's the gallerist or the dealer. There's the actual registrar who works with the gallerist and sort of is the master of records per se. There's the shipping agent who must provide quotes, which almost always are never instantaneously available and must be secured in some mysterious manner in a few hours or a few days. There's the insurance agent who insists that sort of, they have to come see the piece, appraise the piece, and a tornado will hit exactly the moment when you're trying to ship your artwork from point A to point B, and this beautiful piece of art will be destroyed forever. There's the collector's assistant, which also sort of, poor collector doesn't really have the time to deal with all these 6 people, so they usually have an assistant who sort of manages all this process from their end. Now, all these 6 people must somehow interact with each other and actually coordinate with each other to make sure that a piece of art gets from point A to point B, something that in most other industries is done almost instantaneously. This seemed like an opportunity for us to add some value. So what I started thinking is, how can we actually create this black box in the art world that would enable people to interact with each other and make these transactions happen almost real time? So how do we create this black box? So literally the process of doing this is going step by step and actually figuring out why it has not been automated so far and automating this. Now, I could bore you sort of with each and every one of these, but instead of doing that, let me just point out a few of these which I think are particularly interesting. And again, at any point, if I'm using too much business jargon, please excuse me. I worked in management consulting. The shrinks are working on it. But let me point out to the shipping and logistics, which I think is the most interesting part. So what we did is we actually created algorithms which could actually calculate that if an artwork was going from point A to point B, what would be the cost of doing this, something which somehow had never happened before. And now we have multiple shippers running on the system, but that was a big part to figure out, because usually the most time-consuming part of this process was actually talking to all the shippers, getting the quotes in, and then sort of going back to the collector, who is almost always shocked at how expensive the shipping is, and then questions the entire purchase again, and then sort of getting this all happening in real time. On the insurance piece, we actually negotiated with the insurance company and created a point-of-sale insurance product that actually, for $149, actually enabled people to insure their artworks in transit and in-home for up to $25,000 up to a year. Now, this had never happened before. For some reason, sort of like this automation had never been thought about, and we were able to go step by step and actually automate the whole process and create this black box. Now, why do this? I'm going to come back to this. So why do this? And sort of at the end of the day, the entire idea was to focus on all the stuff that people in the art world didn't want to focus on, so they could keep doing what they were doing and do it better, more globally, and sort of like without having to worry about all this back-end stuff. So most dealers we spoke to, when I said shipping, insurance, and so on, they either looked towards their registrar or they rolled their eyes and said, oh my God, I hate that. That is exactly the point. That's sort of like by taking this all off their plate and taking this sort of like into this black box and automating it, we can allow them more time to do the things that they do, which is finding great artists, finding great artworks, finding great collectors, connecting the two, and actually sort of making the kind of videos that Jim is making, which were absolutely spectacular. Economies of scale. Now, this is again a business word that is never used in the art world, but honestly, by consolidating these things from across different dealers and across different transactions, we're able to negotiate discounts, and sort of like in general, you're able to negotiate discounts with vendors, which are often 15 to 20% of the cost. So imagine a new collector trying to buy something for $2,000 and then having to pay another $1,000 to ship it to their home in Tennessee. Now, that situation is extremely uncomfortable for both the dealer as well as for the collector, and sort of by doing this, we're able to cheapen this process to a point where it's still painful but not as much. Faster transaction completion and reduced abandoned carts. Now, many dealers we spoke to, one of their nightmare scenarios was shaking hands with someone in an art fair, a collector at an art fair, saying, yes, I'm going to buy this piece, and then never hearing from them ever again. In spite of repeated calls, in spite of sort of trying to chase them down, never happening. By having an automatic point of sale system, we were able to reduce the incidence of these kind of drop-offs and actually sort of complete these transactions immediately, which gave them and their wives less time to think about whether they actually wanted that artwork, which is very true if you take 2 to 3 months to actually complete the transaction. And finally, the most important thing, which is more funds reaching artists quicker. And that is exactly what drives me every day of the week, which is the fact that sort of at the end of the day, the art world is all about the artists creating artworks, which are seen by more people globally. And I think that, and if we're able to sort of, through these processes, actually make more of that happen, that to us is the core of why we do what we do. And sort of that was the whole premise of creating this black box. So in the end, sort of, we have this kind of a black box transaction model where you can actually do a transaction the same way you would in any other situation. And in our little way, we hope this will bring the art world transaction back-end processes more in line with what's happening in other industries, without touching any of the creative processes, which I feel are so integral to the art world. The insight I want to leave you with, actually, which is a thought, a model, if you will, or a framework, is I have conversations with people all the time who are from outside the creative industry. So finance people, investors, biologists, all people who are drawn to the glamour, the attraction of the art world, fashion, design, and many of these industries, and saying, how can we do anything in these industries without having any skill or talent whatsoever? I mean, for instance, I could not even draw a straight line when I was asked to do so in drawing school. So, I mean, the idea I want to leave you with is there is hope, and there is a way for non-creative professionals to actually add value in these industries by focusing on some of these back-end processes that are integral to these industries, but people, the creatives don't want to deal with because it's distracting them from what they do best. And that is the beauty in the beast, in a way. So thank you so much for that.